Hello, everyone. I want to do a midterm review just so you got a sense of what sort of answers I was looking for in this exam. I'll just state exactly what I was thinking, and obviously, I use my judgment to see how close people are to correct answer, what I consider to be the correct answer. So, of course, I have to use my judgment. So, if you have any questions about how I graded your exam, please let me know. Number one, explain what the first canon of the NSPE code says, what the fourth canon says, and how they may be thought to be in conflict with each other. First canon says engineers must hold paramount the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The fourth canon says that they must be faithful agents and trustees of their employer or client. How they may be thought to be in conflict with one another, I mean, it can be put in so many different ways. Um, it's imaginable, at least, that the engineer may be faced with a kind of conflict between interests. Their interest to uphold the safety of the public, the welfare of the public, and their interest to serve the needs of their client or employer. We can think of any number of situations in which the engineer has to make some kind of choice. Now, some would say that the first canon overrides any fourth canon duties, if there's, but that's a matter of judgment and judging in a situation whether or not um, the first canon, needs to be upheld. Well, first canon does need to be upheld, but whether or not one has to deny, let's say, an employer or client's request in order to uphold the first canon, that's a matter of judgment. Number two, about 01-10, what should the engineer have done? To ethically accept the authorship, just disclose his state of mind, interestingly enough. To disclose that he had a firm intention of accepting an offer with another company, and that he had no realistic intention of accepting any offer from the company that offered the trip. So just disclosing his intent. Number three, explain how Sieghart's general theory of ethics provides a basis for his theory of professional ethics. This is, going on the idea that the very basis for Sieghart's theory of professional ethics is the professional client relationship, the relationship of gross inequality of power. So that um, what the general theory is that ethics begins with relationships between human beings. So there have to be at least two entities and really two human beings. There has to be some kind of relationship, and that relationship has to take place in a world of scarcity where it's not superabundance. So certain choices need to be made. Not everybody can get what they want, which sets up the moral situation, which is the choice between selfishness and altruism. So that sets up the professional relationship where the professional in the relationship of gross inequality of power with their client is faced with a choice between selfishness and altruism, and according to Sieghart, at least, always has to choose altruism. So that's really kind of what I was looking for there. Four, explain Sieghart's idea of the noble cause and explain what part it plays in his theory of ethics. The noble cause is the idea that there is in professional work, in professional life, something that is even more important than serving the needs of the client, doing what's good for the client, and that is the noble cause of the profession, which in some cases can overrule doing what's good for the client. And he gives the infamous example of a doctor who knows that they could help their client by poisoning somebody else. They would actually improve the health of their client, but it would go against the noble cause of medicine, which is to promote health. You can't actively uh, make someone ill by poisoning them. So he has the idea that the noble cause of medicine is health, the noble cause of law is justice. So that even if a lawyer could do something, let's say, good for their client by doing something unjust, they would be prevented from doing it because it would violate the noble cause of the profession. Whether engineering has a noble cause is the big question, and you know If it does, it's the first canon, right? So the idea there would be you could do something for your client that would actually be good for your client. Consider it just in terms of your client's interest. But if it violates the first canon, you can't do it. That's how I think it would apply. 5. Explain the basics of Downey's criticisms of Sighart's idea of professional ethics. Well, this is where the gross inequality of power thing comes in, because I think that his first criticism is that those sort of relationships exist outside the professions. That whenever we are dealing with somebody who's got skills that are greater than ours, we're in a position of inequality of power, and they have a chance to exploit us. Not just, the car mechanic is maybe the most obvious example, but all sorts of other things too. So the idea is that the gross inequality of power is not a sufficient condition for defining a profession. Maybe necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition because it's too widespread. And that the altruism that Sighart thinks follows from the gross inequality of power is not really special to the professions. As Downey says, we all have a duty not to take undue advantage of each other, and that it's just a human duty, general, universal duty, not one that's restricted to the professions. Also, the idea of a noble cause is attacked because of the same reason, basically. The same general reason, and that is it's something that many jobs, occupations could claim. If sure, the noble cause of lawyers is justice, the noble cause of teachers is learning, the noble cause of bus drivers is is safety and efficiency, the noble cause of the postal workers, communication, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that it's wrong, but it's just not really defining of the professions. Number 8, tough question. Explain the importance of the idea of professional judgment in 79-2. That's a situation where 2 engineers have designed a landfill, which a third engineer thinks is a public menace. And the third engineer says so in a public meeting. How can they all be acting ethically is my question. I think the board's answer is because of professional judgment, because part of being a professional, and certainly part of being an engineer, is making judgments about things. So that the whole idea of a judgment is that it is an informed guess, you might say, a responsible, informed guess, allowing for the idea that others may have a different idea. So the whole, I think, basis of that decision is that this landfill, in the professional judgment of the first 2 engineers, is perfectly safe. In the professional judgment of the third, is not. So that professional judgment is that you could come to 2 different defensible conclusions about something, so that the first 2 engineers are not incompetent or breaking the first canon, therefore, and the third engineer is not breaking the part of the code that says you don't you don't criticize other engineers without a very good reason. Number 7, give a brief account of what Kipnis is trying to do in Engineers Who Kill. I think that would go something like this. Kipnis is trying to give an interpretation of the first canon as a rule of practice. That is, not just as an aspirational ideal, but as an actual rule where we can specify the conditions in which an engineer would be in violation of the rule. So he's trying to provide a criterion for when an engineer has acted in violation of the first canon, and his criterion is that happens when the engineer acts as a menace. He obviously has more to say, but that's the broad idea, acting as a menace. He, of course, specifies that as lowering ambient levels of safety with the addition of not making the information publicly available. So I think that there's a little bit at the end where he has to take into account things like the Bart case, but that's really just secondary. It's that idea of lowering ambient levels of public safety. without making the information publicly available. That's his interpretation of the first canon as a rule of professional practice. If you have any questions about the exam and how I graded your exam or what's going on, anything, please let me know.